Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. Welcome to the second episode of our APBA webinar series. We are hosting this webinar series once every month, the first Wednesday of every month. So our first one was last month. This one is the second one. So we hope you'll be joining us in this webinar series. So today we are being hosted by one of our executive committee members, Professor Enoch Achigan-Dako, and the title is Orphan Crops No More, Examples from Fruit, Vegetables, and Legumes. But before we start, I want to encourage most of you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you get these notifications. We're able to view this webinar series. You can connect with us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @APBA. You can also visit us on our LinkedIn page and also Facebook. So kindly also connect with us through those social media handles. May I also kindly ask to mute our microphones when we are not talking. Kindly switch off your videos to avoid distractions. I see one or two videos that are on. Kindly, I see Sina Marias. Could you please kindly switch off your video when we are not speaking? And then if you want to speak, kindly raise your hand. Also kindly type your questions in the chat box so that at the end of the session, we'll be able to go through those questions. This session will run for about 1 hour, 30 minutes. We have the first 60 minutes on the webinar, on the presentation, and then 30 minutes for the discussion. Please kindly mute your microphones so that we avoid feedback. So Professor Enoch is an agronomist and professor of genetics and plant breeding at the Faculty of Agronomic Sciences, University of Abomey, Calavai, Republic of Benin. He is an alumni of the African Plant Breeding Academy of the University of California, UC Davis. Right. So he graduated in 1999 as an agronomist at the Faculty of Agronomic Sciences of the University of Abomey, Calavai in Benin with a national scholarship. He received an MSc degree in 2002 at the University of Cocody in Ivory Coast with a scholarship of the African Development Bank and a PhD degree in 2008 at the Martin Luther University, Halle-Wittenberg in Germany. He completed his research at the Leibniz Institute of Plant Genetics, Crop Plant Research in Germany with a DAAD scholarship. Prof. Enoch was the winner of the 2008 Wawil of Frankel Fellowship sponsored by DuPont Pioneer in Biodiversity International. He contributed more than 90 research papers in high-ranking international journals with a dozen book chapters. He is the coordinator of several projects, including of the program Enhancing Training, Research Mobility for Novel Crops Breeding in Africa, More Breed, a project funded by the Commission of the European Union that aims to strengthen the mobility of training and research on orphan crops in Africa. He's also a co-PI of another European project on the mobility of plant genomics scholars to accelerate climate-smart adaptation options and food security in Africa. Professor Enoch is the coordinator of the capacity building project in leadership and entrepreneurship of young academics in Benin, funded by the MasterCard Foundation. He also coordinates other projects and programs at the African level, including Cleonomics, which aims to develop improved varieties for Akaya, a neglected leaf vegetable for the Western East African markets, and the Taiwan African Vegetables Initiative in Benin. He is also a consortium member of the Sweet Potato Project funded by the African Union and the South coordinator of the project, BioValo, funded by the Partenariats Ave and Signante Supreme of the French government. My apologies for my poor French. Please allow me to welcome Professor Enoch to share with us this afternoon. Thank you. I need
Thank you, Dean. I hope you can hear my voice.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the authorities of the University of Abomey-Calavi, who gave me the opportunity to give this talk, but also the APBA leadership, Professor Achigan-Dako and the team for organizing this webinar series. And throughout this conversation, I call it conversation, I think that we can discuss about orphan crops in Africa. My aim is to raise my voice, join mine to yours so that we look at what is there as information and what we can add more to make African orphan crops more widely marketable, acceptable, and fitting within the industrial sector. I should add that this is in the framework of our third APBA conference, which will be organized in Morocco this year in October 23rd to 27th. If you did not register yet, this is the time to do it. And we hope to have all of you at the conference in months to come. Well, the outline of my conversation with you will be around the world crisis that we are all going through now. And it's important to raise the need to talk more regularly on food and nutrition security and how plant diversity can play an important role, and the place of orphan crops and the various initiatives across the continent. It will be important for me to highlight the agenda for plant breeders around orphan crops. I will tell a few stories, a story about the sea strawberry, a story about the Cliome spider plants. I'll talk about the melon crops cultivated across the world, and also another neglected crop that we call doi, or also Kestange groundnut. And I'll finish with a concluding remark. So basically, when you look at news, when you see what is happening currently in the world, you all recognize that there is a war in Europe, and we should not overlook that, which has a consequence of large displacement of populations. We have gang violences, armed groups, and terrorism in various countries across Africa. And in some countries, you have decades of civil war that contribute into health crisis. And we are just finishing or coming out of a worldwide crisis, health crisis, the COVID-19 aftermath. You all know that we have a lot of consequences from that disease that cover the whole world. And climate change with a number of consequences like failed rain, severe drought, floods, poverty, etc., which all together are contributing to hunger and starvation, while the population is still increasing. But if you look at all those crises across the continent, you will see that Africa has a higher number of, I will call it crises or situations. In Mali, we have problems in Niger, in Sudan, in Chad, in Burkina Faso, armed groups, in Somalia, several years of crisis, in Central Republic of Congo, of Africa, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. All those countries are going through turmoils and unrest, which lead to less productivity, which lead to people occupied with fighting one another instead of increasing the wealth of the country. And this is a situation where the climate change is coming in to complexify everything. Drought is a serious matter and will contribute to reduce the productivity of our crops, and flooding as well will bring unfortunate mass of water that will reduce the productivity as well. And the higher greenhouse gas levels is also contributing to bring another condition, cultivation condition, increasing disease and pest pressure on the traditionally grown crops that we are all used to. And you all know that there are just a few of them: maize, rice, potato. In some areas, we have cassava and other additional crops, overlooking the wide diversity of species of crop that farmers usually will lead on. And a recent paper from our research group brought new data in terms of the suitability of several production locations in Africa, taking into account the 4 major regions recognized by the African Union. And we put emphasis on 4 major crops: maize, rice, cassava, and yams. And the observation is that 14 to 17% of land suitability will decrease, meaning that we need to work at least 10% more to increase yields to meet the future climate in 50 years, namely in 2017. So the risk is very high that we might lose some varieties, we might lose some abilities, we might lose the possibility to grow crops in the traditional conventional areas. But growing is a fact, but quality production is also important, because you know that nutrient is everything. And if you cannot bring the appropriate nutrient to your brain, to your body, you are not doing anything. And we think that even from the early development of a child, the quality of the nutrient is very important. And you all know that iron, iodine, vitamin B, zinc, etc., all contribute to the organization of our brain, of our body. And if you cannot produce a very strong human being today, you lose thinkers and achievers of tomorrow. So basically, the survival question for us as a human being is, what crops can we use to meet the challenges of tomorrow, the challenges of today, and the challenges of tomorrow? To that question, our research brought a new perspective, looking at more than 138 African forgotten crops, including leafy vegetables, fruits, cereals, pulses, even nuts, roots, and tuber. We came to the conclusion that we have 48 crops that can easily meet the future climate conditions with overall good micronutrient provision. This paper is available online, and you can have free access to it. But when talking about orphan crops, how do we define orphan crops, and what are the attributes of orphan crops? Let's say that basically we think that orphan crops are generally rarely promoted. They are not part of the research and development agenda. They are called minor crops, underutilized species, or opportunity crops, forgotten crops. There are many names to refer to those species. While they occupy more than 90% of the agricultural diversity, you go to any farm in Wa or in Bobodiola, so even across Tangita, you find farmers growing maize or other major crops, along with those minor species that they have in the nets that they grow to feed themselves, but also to share with the markets. Those crops that we call orphan crops are generally with low scientific knowledge. I mean, we have a lack of information about them. And in the same time, we have a lack of human resources to take a leading role to develop breeding agenda for those species. In the same time, our governments overall do not have a statistic to inform decision makers, to inform policies, to inform situation, even markets for those species. And the production overall is very limited to engage any industrial company, any person willing to develop the crop. While seeds is problematic, the quality is a problem, the quantity is a problem. Suppose that you want to grow a jute mallow to, let's say, produce jute bags for the industry. You will not have enough seeds of jute across Africa to engage any community into a large-scale production. In the same time, we are losing knowledge, particularly in youth. If you go to urban areas, you will find that most of our traditional crops are less known by them. And the main institutions, the mainstream institutions are not investing in those crops, at least to keep them in the production system. We can give a number of examples of orphan crops. I like to talk about fonio, which is a very interesting cereal, old cereal of West Africa. I like to talk about Bambara groundnut, Vigna subterranea, that you find across the continent from Senegal to South Africa, which is well known, well used, adapted to harsh climates. I can talk about traditional vegetables in general. Here I did not put any name, but there are so many that I will just load the slide with different species name. You will see here pumpkin, let's say Cucurbita maxima, which is largely produced in Niger, in Niamey, and a big market organized every week along the river. You will see some here, this green amaranth with a lot of seeds that people can use to produce infant flour. You will see here egusi, a delicacy in Nigeria, Benin, and Ghana. And somewhere here in the corner, you will see another cucurbitaceous species. It looks like a cucumber, but it's not cucumber. This is Lagenaria siceraria, with a niche market in UK, United Kingdom. People in Cape Coast are growing this crop and selling it every week to UK for a specific market over there. And here you have the Bisa, Roselle, or also hibiscus Habsabdarifa, which is also well produced for tea, and you will find it in many markets in Nairobi where people like the flavor, the taste. And I think that those crops are of very big market if we promote them in one way or another. You have the trees, the indigenous trees, many of them. I'm not talking about Pakia bigobosa that we find in West Africa, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Benin. I'm not talking about baobab, which is traditionally known for its leaves and for the fruit, very rich in vitamin C, or also the shea tree, which is, let's say, a product of international market when it comes to cosmetics, but also the chocolate industry. But also, I will not talk about Syncypalum ducificum, though I have a short story about that particular species. The other ones, I think that knowledge is sufficiently available for another story. But here, since that are available currently, and remember that the FAO started an initiative to promote neglected and underutilized crop species. I don't know today how far they have reached. I know that African Orphan Crop Consortium decided to sequence 101 species to bring in new information, knowledge sequence data to prompt the breeding perspectives, but also the breed government promoted recently through the Biotechnology and Biological Science Research Consortium, a number of projects to promote orphan crops. Results of those different initiatives need to be put together to inform the public, the decision makers, and also to trigger new projects. But then, what could be the agenda for all of us? I mean, for decision makers. Number one, we need to think about markets and value chain development for orphan crops. This is absolutely necessary. If you do not drive by the market, there is no way for orphan crops to emerge. I also think that we need to create a conducive production strategy to increase consumption and nutrient supplementation based on the major orphan crops that we can find in our surrounding, and intensify agroecological intensification, whereby I would say the natural cycling can be promoted, and urban and peri-urban areas can be used for the circular markets. We also think that generating statistics is important. If you do not have accurate statistics, there is no way to develop good policy. And it's high time that we develop technology to upscale low-cost production and processing of those crops. As breeders, we also have agenda, specific agenda for breeders. And the number one will be to understand the biological reproduction status of some of those species, because if you don't cross the first step of knowing the plant, knowing the reproductive condition, you cannot do crosses, you cannot do breeding. Overall, I have noticed that germplants is a problem in Africa. We do not have accurate, I'll say, good facilities for germplants storage. We do not have good facility. Even collecting them and putting them together is problematic. I should say a big thank to another organizations trying recently to put the energy, the forces together to provide germplants, but also to secure some of them for the continent. Phenotyping and genotyping is very, very important if we want to add value and discover new traits for our resources. Then we can go into genomic selection, molecular breeding, all sorts of new omics technology that we have, going through multi-environmental testing and end users evaluation, so that when we have good varieties, we can work with the seed system sectors and provide quality seeds to farmers, to our users, where a good agronomic practices can meet seeds quality so that the production can be improved. So this is a program that should be put in place in every country, and also trying to work together across the continent. I believe that APBA has a very huge responsibility in terms of bringing people together, communicating, sharing knowledge and information to build a strong background for those species. The seed strawberry story is a very simple one. We started a few years ago by testing a number of agronomic practices for that crop, which will take a minimum of 7 years before the first flowering, before the first fruiting. And incidentally, we discovered that our technology, our practices can change the duration of the crop. I will say a big thank to my collaborator, Dr. Delu Chukwunkwe, for having contributed significantly to the knowledge, to the backbone of this research. In fact, for those who do not know the citrus berry, scientifically known as a Syncypalum dulcificum, it's a berry, a shrub that is traditionally exploited in Africa. The fruit will cause sour and acidic food to taste sweet. I mean, if you put a fruit in your mouth, you eat it, and if after you drink lemon, your lemon will taste like sweet, like sugar. And that property is due to the presence of a glycoprotein known as miraculate. In addition to that component, the fruit is rich in many other compounds. I will not talk about those compounds now. I'll just focus on the miraculate, which is something that we can promote worldwide and develop a market around it. Because if you can stop eating sugar, if you can reduce your consumption of sugar, then there is a major disease that you can avoid, which is the diabetes. The Diabetes Association is indicating several millions of people suffering from that disease across the world. And the simple needs to eat sugar contributes to intensify the disease in many people. Our solution is to reduce the consumption of sugar and simply replace it by the consumption of citrus berry. And this is already happening, whereby companies in Europe tried to harvest, natural harvest, natural collecting from Ghana, from Togo, from Benin, to sell the fruit in the European markets. And currently, I can say that the European Union approved a bill whereby dry fruit of Syncypalum can be sold in the European market. And this is the bill that I can share with you anytime if you want. Unfortunately, that species will grow slowly, very, very slowly. It will take several months, years before it reaches an acceptable yields, acceptable production. And this is where we brought in our knowledge to reduce the production cycle of the plant from 7 to 2 years. So from 2 years, our plants are capable of producing fruits, and also to accelerate the growth in the plant by combining several technology. Currently, we were able to combine nutrient mediation, but also shade associating citrus berry with banana production, and to increase the yield, to increase the production. It's also important to indicate that this has been a breakthrough in Benin, and currently we are producing seedling, sharing it, distributing them to local producers, and engaging new research avenues so that the knowledge of citrus berry can be improved and the market developed and the products available for industries, but also for common consumers. It has been interesting to look at the traits, the useful traits. And I will tell you that the miraculin is present in the flesh of the fruit, and the seeds can be used for cosmetic, but the flesh is important. So it's of paramount importance for us to know exactly which trait we are working on, which trait we are selecting. And this was done across the Upper Guinea and Dahomey Gap. When I say Upper Guinea and Dahomey Gap, I mean from Ghana up to Benin. And we found 3 major gene pool from the phenotypic information, phenotypic data. And from the knowledge, we were able to infer the center of diversity of Syncypalum, which is the Dahomey Gap, covering from the Lake Volta in Ghana, crossing Togo up to Benin, which is a center of diversity of the species. But we went further and questioned the genome of the plant by generating SNP data. And from the SNP data, we clearly found 2 gene pools. One covering the eastern and the western Upper Guinea region in Ghana, and the second one from the Volta region to the Weme River in Benin. So splitting the West African population into 2. And also when you look at the morphological data, you clearly see a difference between the forest genotypes and the savanna genotype. It's important for us now to look at the nutrient content, to look at the other metabolites available in the plant to see where we can develop different product chain. Going to the Achaia story, and I will try to be brief. There were many collaborators on this crop. Achaia is a vegetable that is widely consumed in Africa. It's a cosmopolitan species. When you go to northern Togo in Kara, you look at it as a weed because it grows everywhere, yet it's a delicacy. When you go to Nairobi, you find it in supermarkets, and people associate it with groundnuts to cook it as a delicacy. But I think that the interest of my research team around Cleome is more about the capacity of the plant to resist droughts. Remember that Cleome, known as Gynandropsis gynandrica, is a C4 plants. And in the family, in the Cleomaceae family, we have both C3 and C4 plants, as well as C3, C4 intermediates. And also, Cleome, the Cleomaceae family, is a sister family to the Arabidopsis family. It's important for us to know that C4 photosynthesis is thought to have been an adaptation strategy for plants, meaning that if you want to challenge the climate change, if you want to fit within future environments, it's important for us to understand how C4 photosynthesis is promoted. And Cleome is an important model crop for us. First of all, we started by looking at the genetic diversity, the morphological diversity, and we certainly found that even from the seed aspects, there is a difference between accession from different regions. The variation was huge. So seed mineral content was associated with provenances. That was summarized within a paper that we titled Origin Dependence of Variation in Seed Morphology, etc. That is available online. But we look at also the leaf elemental composition, mineral content in the leaf. And we also saw a lot of variations. When you consider accessions from Asia, they are all in yellow here. You find that within those accessions, we have variation. Even accession from Southern Africa, we have variation inside it. Accession from West Africa, same thing. But when you group different accessions according to the parameters that we use, you saw a clear segregation and association with origin. So from the leaf elemental composition, we find different nutrient groups, but associated in some way to the origin. We went further and looked at the biomass variation and related to traits within 4 selfing generations, 4 generations advanced line, to look at the stability of the traits from one generation to the other. And the results, the trends was the same. Going further, we look at the metabolites content, and even the metabolite content was driven by geographical structure. Asian accessions were clearly separated from the East and Western accessions and the West African accessions. And you will see that those variations indicated here and mapped according to the origin also were congruent with the other specialized metabolites that we analyzed still in the leaf. And when we look at the vitamin content, we touch the beta carotene, we touch the vitamin E, vitamin A, in addition to vitamin C, a number of morphological parameters were also collected. We saw clear association between those traits, indicating that overall, we can group the accessions of Cleome gynandra into geographical provenance, even the vitamin content was associated with origin. For now, it's important to know that in West Africa, what we have generally as Cleome is a short plant with small leaves, with high tocopherol content and low carotenoid content. So we find more tocopherol in accessions from West Africa than accession from Asia, which indicated higher tocopherol content. But when you come to accessions from Southern Africa and East Africa, they are usually tall plants, broad leaves, with low tocopherol but high carotenoid content, meaning that we can associate, we can develop our varieties based on different regions, but we can also combine different traits and have hybrids coming from different sources. Fortunately, the genome of Gynandropsis gynandra compared to Cis-Rex encephalum, the genome is sequenced, and we try to understand how the C4 photosynthesis is structured, is organized, is expressed within the plants. And it's important to indicate that basically the association of Gynandropsis gynandra within the phylogenetic group represent an interesting study and interesting story that help to understand how photosynthesis can be expressed in the Cleomaceae family, but also in the Brassicaceae family. The contribution and impact of gene duplication observed in Cleome is something that can help understand the C4 photosynthesis in the Cleomaceae family. And you will see that Cleome gynandra that went through gene duplication is a sister to Hasseleriana, which show another genome duplication. All the story about Cleomegranandra was summarized within a paper. And basically what we did was to provide the main thematic areas for improving Cleome utilization for development, meaning that we provided ways for industries to add value to the crop, to exploit the different It's good to tell the Egusi melon story. When I started my PhD studies a decade ago, I've discovered that Egusi is a crop that I usually confuse with watermelon, unless I cut the fruit in two to see what is inside. Well, this is the Egusi seeds. We cook it as a source of protein, and we cook it in sauce, in fact. You find that practice, that cooking habit in Benin, in Nigeria, in Ghana. I've seen it also in Burkina Faso, though it's less developed in those countries. So the coastal communities in West Africa are very used to the Egusi crop. Yet, in some years back, Egusi has the same name with watermelon. In fact, people were calling Egusi Citrullus lanatus, and watermelon was also called Citrullus lanatus. So as a younger PhD student, I was very confused with all those botanical names. So I put my effort into understanding why two different crops with different features, morphological features, could be called the same name. I finally discovered that, in fact, when you look at the morphological traits from the flowers to the seeds and everything, you should not be calling them the same name. And you will see a lot of variation with the fruits, inside the fruit, from the bitter taste to the flat taste, sweet taste, sour taste in the fruits. You will see different colors, you will see different type of seed, etc. And finally, with all these confusions, I decided to give a different name to Egusi melon. And while trying to do that, I've discovered that a man from Russia already, his name is Fusa, already understood the variation between watermelon and Egusi melon and gave a different name to Egusi melon, which is Citrullus mycosospermus. But the Western scientists will not take that name. I don't know why. And that justified my research, whereby I put together all the possible genotype of Citrullus that I can find at that moment. I put them together, analyze them, and you will see those black dots here are clearly differentiating themselves from the overall other dots here. The black dots are the Egusi dots. So I decided to confirm the study of the Russian man, indicating that we should keep the name Citrullus mycosospermus for Egusi melon to make it different, so that we are able to talk about different things. Because you should not, you cannot understand the amount of wealth that we have in the Egusi. Apart from the protein, we also have a very good source of oil, of fatty acids, which is comparable to the olive oil, if you look at closely what is inside the Egusi melon. So from the protein to the oil, there is a value that we should add to that specific crop. While doing that research, all my assertions, or part of my assertion, were shared with another group in Munich, and they compared to the first material of linear and came to the result that, in fact, egusi melon should be considered as a very different crop, a very different species, different from watermelon. And this paper from Susanna Renner gave me justice about what I have been indicating for several years before the scientific community accepts my proposition, which gave me the opportunity to look into the diversity of species within the Citrus genus and to go into the georeferencing phylogenetic analysis for a global collection of wild and cultivated Citrus in Africa. The result that we found was a very interesting one. Basically, the haplotype network indicated West Africa as a center of origin of watermelon. In fact, egusi is endemic to West Africa, and we did not find any wide relative anywhere that group the haplotype the way we found egusi, doing that with other or mates I interacted was finally, it was approved that the diversity of haplotype in Africa, you'll find many of them, compared with the diversity of haplotype in Asia, also added to the diversity of haplotype in Europe, which basically introduced haplotype, plus the low diversity observed in the American continent, place Africa as the continent of choice for indicating the origin of watermelon together with its sister species, Citrus mycospermus. The same story goes with the sweet melon, which is not the watermelon. This is another genus. This is a Cucumis species. And the Cucumis species, if you want to have an idea of that, go to the Syngenta campus in California. You see a wide, large field, okay, of research going on. This is a market that you cannot imagine when you are just in your university somewhere in APBA Conference or elsewhere. That market is huge, and several species belong to the Cucumis genus. The well-known is the cucumber that of us will eat almost every day, but we have a range of diversity within it. But I want to talk about this specific one, this small one that we call Cucumis melo subspecies aggressors, which I've discussed with colleagues in other universities in Africa. Basically, we were all confusing the Cucumis melo aggressors with Cucumis melo, which is Asian. Aggressors is supposed to be African. The morphological trait very different, but it came out that the size of aggressors will never grow beyond a certain level, while aggressive melo can be bigger. And even in gene banks, there were a lot of confusions. So I traveled to 2-3 gene banks to compare my assertions with those of those gene banks and came out with the information that all I have collected across West Africa, all these white dots here are different places where I have collected melo assertions. And basically putting together plant materials from Australia, from Asia, and Africa, we came together with a team in Munich that we should consider 3 subspecies within the Cucumis melo species. But also, the modern melon is associated to 2 different lineages. One lineage in Africa and another lineage in Asia. And it's possible to, from the haplotype network, to indicate clearly which ones are from Africa and which are from Asia. And what was called agrestris melo with haplotype collected from Ghana, haplotype collected from Benin, Nigeria, and Togo, and even haplotype collected from Cabo Verde, we built what I would call a gene pool that we now call Cucumis melo, subspecies meloides, to differentiate it from the Asian gene pool. The consequence is that we found hybridization in the past, which leads to the current modern cultivars of Cucumis melo, and consequently, the wide assertions of Cucumis meloides in Africa are good, wide relative that can support the breeding agenda of the conventional melo that we found in markets. Well, I believe that my time is close to be over. I don't know if Dean will allow me to talk more, but I was planning to talk about the Kesten's groundnuts story, but I don't think I have enough time to go through. I'll just take the opportunity to thank a number of colleagues at different groups working on Kesten's groundnuts, Macrotiloma, Geocapum, several PhDs or PhD students involved in the research, from the team from the Laboratory of Ecology to the team in Dassa Operaku in Benin. All of them engaged into bringing new information about the crop. And now we have a pool of scientists in Burkina Faso also interested in the crop, developing new knowledge. I will take the opportunity to thank them very briefly and stop there to be on time as indicated by the program. Thank you, Dean. The floor is back to you. Hello?
Well,
Dean, are you lost or are you still there? Hello, Dean, do you allow me to continue or should I stop here? We can't hear you, Dean. You are talking, but we cannot hear your voice.
we still can't hear you, Dean.
Dean?
Hello, Prof. Prof Enoch?
Yes.
Yeah, so Mr. Mungani is having some network challenges, so he would want us to open the floor for any questions. And
Okay.
when we take them, we would close after we have addressed most of the questions. Thank you. So please, the floor is open for questions. If you have any questions for Prof Enoch, kindly put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and talk. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I think this is not a question. I just want to thank Professor Enoch for the presentation. It was a great one, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for taking your time to share the work with us. It was a great one. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. David, I suppose that you will manage the conversation.
That's right, Prof. The floor is still open for any questions for Prof. Achigan-Dako's presentation. Prof, we have a note here from Professor Ritamam expressing her thank you for such an insightful presentation. Okay, Collins, you can go for your question. Hello, Collins. Collins Bisua, do you have a question?
Hello, there are some questions in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Okay, we also have most of these coming in as a thank you for your presentation. So from Muritala, Muritala is congratulating you for such an excellent presentation. And the same goes for Frida Dosa. Dr. Beatrice Ifie is also congratulating you for a good presentation. And her question is, what is the format for access and benefit sharing put in place considering the different places which genetic resources are collected? Prof, did you get that?
Yes.
Hello, Prof.
I got it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you want me to answer straightforward?
Yes, Prof. Then we move to the next one. Charles and Tenanda, we will get back to you very shortly.
Okay. It's important to indicate that before collecting any genetic resources, it's important to have an informed consent from the community. Basically, we will contact the elders, the chief of the village, or organizations when we are not working directly in Benin. Even working directly in Benin, we have to get signed documents from the mayorship while assessing the genetic resource. And if we want to share outside Benin, we use the FAO protocol. So we sign a material transfer agreement the way FAO indicated. And if it is for research, it's very easy. So far, we did not share any genetic resources with industries, but if it has to happen, there is access and benefit sharing protocol in place. There are directives in place that we follow to get the necessary approval before we share. So that's what I can answer to Professor Beatrice's question. And I also say thank you for all those who congratulate me for the talk.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, Dean, welcome back.
Sorry, I could hear you, but I was speaking. I even put my video on. I don't know what happened. So there are some questions, I think, in the chat. I think David went through them. So for now, let's allow Charles first, and then we go to Tatenda. Quick questions, yeah. Then we go to the chat. Yes, Charles, go ahead, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Professor Enoch. Hello?
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you. Go ahead. We can hear
Good
you.
afternoon, Professor Enoch. I want to thank you for this insightful presentation. During the presentation, you talked about the watermelon and the egusi and the habitation you use over there. My question is that the watermelon I know here in Nigeria is consumed, but the egusi is also consumed, but not as a fruit. So in the crosses that was obtained, did you people check the test so that to check if it's consumable? Because we have some region here that can be able to grow. Hello? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I said the watermelon, we have some region here that can grow the watermelon, but they cannot grow the egg. So my question is that did Prof be able to test the fruit of the crosses that was obtained from the egusi and watermelon, so that if it's edible for consumption, so we can actually embark on that so that we can promote it over here.
Okay, so Prof Enoch, I think just keep that. Then let me take Tatenda and Soknibe. Then we can have them. You can respond to the three questions. Tatenda, unmute yourself and go ahead. Hello, Tatenda. Maybe let's have Soknibe Daniku. Kindly unmute yourself and.
Okay, thank you very much, Dean. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Just go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Professor Achigan-Dako, for this brilliant, inspiring presentation. I think all of us, we enjoyed. I have some quick, comments and follow-ups. You presented a framework in which I think you were urging the research community on different tasks, different topics that we all together we should work on. And one is breeding. And I would like to know from APBA perspective, where do we stand today? Because 10 years back, 15 years back, the continent was lacking very acutely breeders on different crop groups. So currently, where do we stand? And when we talk about orphan crops, particularly, do we have trained human resources to take the challenge for Africa? That is the first point. The second one, looking at the things from a value chain perspective to build sustainable food systems. We usually say that we should work from farm to forks. So currently, with the research accumulated, what could be a framework in which we collaborate with different value chain actors to make sure that the material that are developed from the different breeding programs are now mainstream through to the consumer, and also meeting the preferences of the different value chain actors. By value chain actors, I mean farmers, traders, and then consumers. So these are, two comments, and also at the same time, like questions. Thank you again, Prof.
Thank you so much. Tatenda, are you back? I think, go ahead, Prof, just respond to the two questions.
Thank you. Starting with Dr. Charles. Thank you, Charles, for your comments. Basically, I did not say that hybrids from egusi and watermelon are edible. No. There were crosses by Levy in the US. Levy did crosses between egusi melon and watermelon. Successful, though it was limited, meaning that there were some barriers, okay, indicating that the two species are quite fitting well where they are. But egusi melon will have a bitter flesh. So we don't eat it. We don't eat the bitter flesh. It is the seeds that we extract for the protein source and also for the oil. But for watermelon, the flesh is what we eat. But we can swallow the seeds very easily. We can also extract the seeds and roast it and eat it as a snack. I've seen that in Segu in Mali and also close to Tombutu when they were a kind of peace long ago, some years back. And I think for places in Nigeria where they grow watermelon, they can also grow egusi melon, though I've seen that egusi melon would be fitting within drier environment, while watermelon can accept dry and humid environments. So all depends on the local condition in place. Coming to the questions from Professor Ndaniku, I will say that APBA is thinking, has put a commission in place, a committee to develop a breeding agenda for the continent. So I should say that there is a reflection ongoing at our level, inviting experts across the continent to see how we can produce something meaningful for the continent. But it's also important to remind that we need a strong support from the continental umbrella, the African Union, and Prof. Ndaniku knows very well the situation with the biotechnology platform. This is not the area to go into detail, but I think that your voice is very important for us where you are to push things, move strongly ahead. So if by any means you can assist us, you can contribute, we'll be very happy. Now, from the value chain perspective, farm to fork, yes, I agree. We share the same reflection about that. But now the question is, how do we manage, keep the material, develop the material so that it can be profitable for the local communities, all end users? Well, this is quite possible, but also be reminded that we have a lot of interest when it comes to genetic resources. And if we have performance genetic resources, we need to either protect or work with seed companies or find a suitable way to make available the resource for the local producers. This is a complex environment where we need to develop strong legal framework, but also be flexible. So there is a kind of trade-off that we need to put in place, develop so that the genetic resources from the local community can be returned back to the local community for their interests. Now, you put a very big question about how do we train, we develop capacities, how do we train people to be specifically focusing on orphan crops. Even for the major crops, we do not have enough breeders. And this is certainly the place to thank all those institutions from, I'll say, South Africa, AKI, West Africa, WAKI, Uganda, all the funding from AGRA, recently the investment of the African Plant Breeders Academy, UC Davis, Mobreed with the European Union founding Genes in Nigeria with Professor Selebe. All those initiatives, those small, are contributing into something. But as I used to say, for plant breeding agenda in Africa, we need a very huge investment, financial investment, which is difficult to get for now. But if we position ourselves, APBA, as a strong stakeholder, and if we put our voice together, if we generate accurate knowledge for the policy makers, for the decision makers, I think in the near future we'll have a strong voice and to influence policy. That's what I can say.
Thank you. So we are running out of time, so we need to be, I'll just take a few rounds of questions and comments. Nyasha, please kindly unmute and go ahead. Then Tatenda, please, if you can, you have your question. If you can't, just type it in the chat, then we can read it. So Nyasha, please go ahead.
All right, good afternoon, Prof. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. And very interesting for myself because I'm also working on something to do with orphan crops. And yeah, I really found this very interesting. So Prof, you know, we have moved from the Green Revolution, isn't it? And we are now in the Gene Revolution, as some people would say. What are the prospects that you see in this particular sector of crops, the orphan crops, which we say, which are usually found in developing countries and which are not mainstream crops, as we may say? What are the prospects for new technologies such as, you know, genetic engineering? What opportunities can have you identified in this particular sector of crops?
Yes, quickly go through that so that we go to the chat. I have some comments. Prof, just go ahead as I go to the chat and pick.
I see a lot of perspective, Prof. Nyasha, yeah. I see a lot of perspective. We can gain in time. We can gain in time when we use new technologies. Gene editing can bring a lot for orphan crops, but we need to be very accurate in terms of selecting the traits that we want to work on so that we know exactly how to place our breeding goal. But gene editing is not something that you will find in any corner of Africa. So training is still the important instrument that we need to use. Train more, bring in facilities, and being able to generate more information on the species we are working on. For now, for the best of my knowledge, you will see the Chinese scientists running up for sequencing some of the crops that we are talking about. So how much do we invest in Africa to have the needed technology to produce the information we want so that we go into editing, into knowing the function of each gene and associating those functions to the environmental effects? That's maybe we can discuss after the presentation and see how we can outline a number of reflective ways about it.
Okay, thank you so much. So let me quickly go to the chat. There is one. Thank you, Prof. This is from Solomon Sime. Thank you for your nice presentation. During your germplasm collection, have you assessed East African, especially Ethiopia, for the case of watermelon? That's number one. And then from Tania, how can we protect our traditional cultures from misuse and also from resource plunderers? You can respond to those quick ones.
Yes, currently the USDA has access to or collected before the Rio de Janeiro conference, collected a lot of resources from our various countries. So I did not go to various specific countries in Africa. I directly went to USDA to have access to the material. I can say that the Ethiopian material is not that different from the East African material. The difference is found in Somalia. Somalia has specific accessions that can bring in new information. Somalia and Egypt. Going back to Tanya, how do we protect our traditional knowledge? It's first of all by training and generating the information, writing that information in books, in documents, and making it available and sharing back to the youth, to the local communities. That's what I see as way. Unless if she has some contribution, I'll be happy to get them.
Okay, thank you. Then the other one, this is from Ferdinand. Thank you for the comments. The question is, I'm just wondering whether they are already, as the African orphan crops have this great potential to help accelerate climate resilient food systems and food security. I'm just wondering whether they are already being taken into account in the global policies regulating the agricultural sector. There's some work on the implementation of climate change on agriculture and food systems. Any assurance, please? You can respond to that one as I also.
Yes, I saw the FAO trying to organize an action plan around it. We were invited under the umbrella of UC Davis and Rita Mom to FAO to promote a few actions. The follow-up is a bit longer than expected. Dean?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Prof. Right. I was saying thank you, Daniel, for the comment. It's just a comment. Thank you, Tanya, for the comment. Thank you, Mary, for the comment. Then Kisito, excellent presentation. Please, I would want to find out from your opinion the clear difference between orphan crops and neglected species. What is the difference?
Just consider that they are the same. It's just a matter of vocabulary.
Okay. Then Aminuti Bogale, despite the importance of food and nutrition, the cultivation of crops has remained few Western African. Is there any research advancing those crops out to other African regions? And so there's one, that one, then I think this one is, the focus maybe was, the feeling was it was on West African countries, but is there any effort towards advancing these orphan crops research to other parts of Africa? And then also maybe let's add this one. Did you carry out crossbreeding trials for the study on the phenotypic variability of the collection of egusi? This is from Maria Sina.
Yeah, basically the I say genotypes, the accessions that I have used are mainly from West Africa for some of the crops. For Syncypalum, for instance, you find it only in West Africa. For folio as well. But for Cleome, we extended to Southern Africa, East Africa, and Asia. And Doiwe groundnut, the Keston groundnut, is also limited to Nigeria, Ghana, in the Wa region, northern Togo, Benin, Central Benin, etc. So it's a matter of germplasm origin. But you see also champions and research in East Africa, South Africa on orphan crops. And I can provide names and contacts anytime.
And then the crossbreeding, I hope you've touched on that, on the egusi side.
Yes, the question of Marius is on the phenotypic variability on the collection of egusi. So if I've carried out crossbreeding trials, yes and no. Yes, because we have tried. No, because we did not push it forwards. So far, if I don't have the simplest answer is no, though I know it is successful. So we have information on our background.
Then I'll take this one from Tanya. How do you think we can associate African governments for the good exploitation of these resources to limit the importation of certain foodstuffs? Because we have a diversity that we can exchange between African countries. Did you get that one?
Yes, okay. I got it. I was just thinking of coming the Prime Minister of Benin or somewhere to be able to. No, seriously speaking, African governments do have priorities. So it's our job, responsibility to generate the needed information and because our policymakers, they are busy and always trying to prioritize. So our job should be to highlight the importance of those crops and make the information available. And from my own experience, we need to go to them. Don't just wait and sit in your university or research center and expect that they will come to you. They don't do that. So it's our responsibility to go to them. Now, how to go to them, that's a complex way. And maybe training more and pushing some of our past students to become decision makers can help. I don't know. Maybe other people can contribute to that question.
Okay, then the other one, I'll just combine two. How does a strategic plan for market development of orphan crops looks like regarding our development plans and culture? And then the other question from Hela, what about bottle gourd, which is an interesting orphan crop and very used in Africa? Did you also consider that? So you can just touch on the two. I think those are the last ones.
Yes, I touched bottle gourd, Cucurbitacea, Lagenaria siceraria. I even talk about it. Lagenaria siceraria currently has an international market for the fruit, fresh fruits to the UK, but also Lagenaria siceraria is used as egusi. So there is a specific genotype that we use as egusi, and we extract oil out of it. So how do we combine that with the market strategy? Well, it starts with entrepreneurs, with startups, with because the innovation is already there for many of those crops. It just takes that we need to upscale. We need to bring in the knowledge, the information, but also to try to prototype and see how the market responds. If you take something like Macrotyloma geocarpum, let's call it Vigna radiata, mung bean. So currently there is a very huge market in development for radiata here in Benin, in West Africa. And I think that if we place the products in Beatrice. Yeah, I can hear your voice. So if we place the product in the right channel, it's possible to sell it to, promote it the way it should be, like quinoa in Latin America. Today you can hear about quinoa everywhere, while some of us have never seen quinoa. It's how we spread the information, and we market. We do the marketing of the value of the. I can tell you that Sensipalum is being marketed in France, in Spain, even in Germany, from the wide collection that those companies will do in Ghana. So they will go into the communities, they will harvest, and from the collecting point to Tema, they will dry or collect the flesh and dry it and send it through the ports, the harbor to Europe.
Mm.
And that is happening every day.
Okay.
But many people are not aware of it. So we need to organize all those things to make it more structured.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much. I see many people there. Koja, Biratu from Ethiopia, Frida, Herla, Kisito, Patience, Nyakanda, Collins, Bezua. Thank you so much for joining us, for your comments and everything. We invite you again for the next episode in a series, which will be on the 3rd of May. We'll have a different speaker showcasing the potential and opportunities that exist in Africa. I would like to also invite you to search for the 3rd APBA conference, which is scheduled for 23rd to 27th of October in Morocco. We are still taking abstracts. Please go there, go to the websites, different websites that are there. There's the APBA website, CGR website that are showcasing the details of how you can submit your abstracts and also register for the conference. I also want to invite you to follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn, and then subscribe to our YouTube channel for notifications. This presentation will be put on our YouTube channel, so you can go through the whole presentation. Otherwise, this is 2:30 in Nigeria. Thank you for joining us today. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.